Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Reasons and Resources. So in this episode we are taking a look at reasons and resources for learning OCaml. So this is another one where the only reason I ended up taking a look at OCaml was in preparation for putting this video together, and also as part of my Programming Polyglot website, which I'll get to at the end. So, beyond just curiosity, what are some reasons why you might want to learn OCaml, and also reasons that are going to make me revisit OCaml after initial sort of toe dipping. So let's go through some of those and some of the reasons that are sort of put out there as attractors to the language. So we've got robust type systems and type inference in here. High performance, it compiles to native code. So, good choice for performance critical systems. You can see here's the tool chain. So we've got interpreter, bytecode compiler, native code compiler, reverse debugger, package manager. And the other thing with this, I spoke about standard ML last video. So yeah, it's been influenced by standard ML along with C, Caml, Modular 3 and Pascal. And it's gone on to influence other things as well, as you can see here. So I suppose that's another reason personally why I like to learn these sort of languages, because they sort of form this language evolution chain specifically for these ML derived languages. So this is an interesting tree you can go back through and sort of follow through these different sort of dialects and then what they influenced. And F# is part of that family. And sometimes it's interesting to sort of prod around in the weeds, so to speak, is start off with some sort of influential language and then spread out from there. So you're sort of not going necessarily forward, you're going backwards as well. And so you can sort of, that lends itself quite well actually to tiny experiments, is you can sort of start off with a tiny experiment, say in OCaml or whatever, and then from there might be something in the language that you think, that's something I've not seen before, and then say, well, where did that come from? Was it original to the language, or was it an idea that's been that's come in from another language, one of the influenced by, and so then sort of move into that language maybe if it does turn out that it's come in from something else, and then do some experiments in that language for that particular thing and see how it manifests itself in that language. And then once you've done that, you just keep sort of going backwards to almost like ground zero. So you're sort of working your way back through a aspect of a language and sort of seeing the origins of that aspect, if that makes sense. So yeah, I've just added in another one of my own personal reasons. That wasn't really on my list, I don't think, but that's suddenly jumped into my head. Also here, yeah, there's a modular aspect to it. So that's what I found really handy. I'm getting a little bit more of a sort of modular mindset, and I can't really think where that started specifically. Yeah, back when I first learning programs, I wasn't good on modularity, and then over time I've got more modular in my thinking. But I know recently some of the languages I've been playing around with in the last 2 to 3 years have definitely helped me get into a more modular way of thinking. So, OCaml is just another nudge, I suppose, in that direction. There is, I believe, an interesting blend here that you do see in other languages. It's a multi-paradigm language, but this interesting blend of a functional language with an imperative language. Yeah, now, like I said, other languages will have it, but I think it's quite interesting when you get blended paradigms in a language and seeing where that can take you. Now, sometimes it's interesting to just sort of sit there and go, okay, well, let's do in this particular language more in the style of A, and then in the same language doing the more in the style of B. And as I've said, a lot of languages being multi-paradigm, you can do that, but with some languages it's a little bit more interesting than others, and there's also features in certain language, and the one I was going to just suddenly bounced into my head that its name is on the tip of my tongue, where it does both, object-oriented and functional, outside of specific multi-paradigm languages, but there is one which is really interesting, and the two ways of programming, the way it looks, so I'm really interested in like how code looks when it's in front of you, the sort of structures, the code aesthetic. But it's really interesting to see in languages where you've got paradigm blending, and how when you program in the different paradigms, how that actually looks aesthetically, and how vastly different it can look in the same language, which is really interesting and curious at the same time. And then the other thing that might interest you is like which companies are using it for their infrastructure. And so what I'll do is I'll include a link to this and then some sort of deeper links further down the article, so you can get an idea of the code aesthetics, the classic sort of hello world, maybe some features, constructors that are always interesting when you get these certain constructors in languages, which suddenly make maybe the aesthetic look different than you're used to if you've never seen something like this before. So this is always something that this gets me curious. First time I think I saw a language something like this, with this sort of layout here with the bar, that position there. Now you see this elsewhere if you've ever done any sort of maybe sort of Boolean work, but it's interesting to see things like stack like this as well. So there's a summing a list of integers as well. This thing of when you do certain things in a language, and the way you structure it, again, you get used to this sort of aesthetic. So something that interests me as well is like, what do recursive calls look like in a language structurally? What similarities, like here it makes a point that match statements are similarities to C switch element. But it is interesting when you see a language that appears to be leaning into pattern matching, in the various ways you can do that, and then how structurally that manifests itself in the code aesthetic. And that's why it's pretty useful, I think, to take things. You can have quite a lot of fun is taking something like the sort of classic quick sort, and then at the same time for each language sort of leaning into the idiomatic elements of the language. See how that, when you consider the idioms in the language as well, what that looks aesthetically. So if you take quicksort in OCaml and compare it to how idiomatically you do quicksort in Python or PHP or Perl or whatever, and get used to seeing that laid out structurally. And so classic problems in computing, classic algorithms, it's quite interesting to do that across multiple languages, and like I said, leaning into their specific idioms, because sometimes you can sort of program in a language in a style that's very similar to the other language that you've come from, but you're not really leaning into the idioms of the newer language. And the other thing as well is where I've mentioned like blended paradigms or multi-paradigms, however you want to think about it. Doing the same thing in the different available paradigms within that language, and see how that looks aesthetically as well. So yeah, lots to think about in terms of reasons there. And as I said, I've included the link. Where are we on the still here? Well, this is interesting. I'll get onto in a moment actually, but I'm looking here at the 2024 Stack Overflow survey still. So most popular technologies, and I think it's buried away down near the bottom here. Admired, desired. Yeah, it's sort of here, another one with quite a big chasm between this, which is the desired value, and this, which is the admired. And then if we get onto top paying technologies, and this is the one I must find most fascinating, because it is that year on year, it's the chart that has the most volatility, the most amount of entropy, I suppose, is another way to think about it. And it always interests me, like what bounces in and out. So I'm really curious, and we'll take a quick look, because something seems to have changed that I need to look into. But I'm really curious how this particular group of things change year on year, and what comes in, what goes out. So OCaml's about, 1/3 of the way from the top, roughly. Now, what's interesting is when I checked, and I'm this video that I'm shooting now, with what I can see to be considered to be evergreen videos and non-time sensitive, I'm usually about 3 weeks ahead on those. So I shoot them and then they get released in 3 weeks' time. I sort of build up this head of stuff. But sometimes you get elements within these videos which are indirectly time sensitive, and this is a good example. So by the time you watch this video where I'm talking about the 2025 Stack Overflow survey just coming out, I may well have already done a video specifically about it, where I've just shot it and then released it. And I was going to talk a little bit more this morning in this video about it, but I've noticed that something interesting and slightly funky has gone on with section 2.4, in that there is no section 2.4, which is where I believe the top paying technologies was originally placed. So either it's buried away somewhere else, and I've literally only just looked at this as I was recording this video, because as I was starting to do some preamble, I thought I should check and see if it's out. And I think this was released actually 11 hours ago, and I'm recording this on the 31st of July. So yeah, I need to find out where 2.4 went, whether there's anything clever going on here, because that was my favourite bit. So yeah, I'll be a bit miffed if that's not that sort of several years of ongoing spreadsheet work on the head, but we will see. I do still do this one, but there's not so much interesting volatility on this. It's like the usual suspects. If you look at, let me just show you. Yeah, they just sort of shuffle around a little bit each year. So what we got? JS, Python's shuffled around a little bit. SQL's gone back up. Yeah, so you find the top few just like shuffle around. And so I think it's been the same stuff in the top 10 for a long time now, several years. Anyway, there will be a video at some point, which you will probably already have seen by the time I this video goes out. So some useful resources. The OCaml website. Surprise, surprise. This is where you can install it from if you want to. Then we've got this book, which is the real world OCaml book. There we go. See, you can. Don't you love free resources on the web? This is getting so. I mean, like, although I enjoy seeing the evolution of programming languages against my timeline of someone that started like dabbling and having to write out at school on coding sheets to be sent off somewhere to process my basic programming, and then it would come back 3 weeks later, and if I'd made a mistake, that would be all the work down the drain. You have to redo it. But what's great now is so much stuff, and you know, I think you know from other videos, I really love programming books, but it's nice that you have the option now to basically, you know, dive into this stuff online if you like. You know, books are your preferred way of learning, and I do like just the way stuff is sort of laid out here. I always get the warm fuzzies when I see a let statement, just because historically, you know, when I first learnt like original basic as it would be running on a mainframe, you know, there were let statements in there, so yeah, very nostalgic about the let statement. And then we have this book, OCaml Programming Correct and Efficient and Beautiful. So again, another one. So great resources for OCaml. Fantastic. And then we have this. So if you want to go in and play, there's a REPL on OCaml.org, and you can play around with the REPL. So you don't even have to install anything on your local machine if you just want to mess about. And you just run it. I'm sure you're familiar with online REPLs, and appears over here, and then you can durdle around with the code. So let's break the code, see what happens. If I'm not breaking it sufficiently, am I? What if I do that? There you go. So I was force of habit. I was like taking out chunks, which actually didn't matter because everything was within. So that's funny. Okay. So yeah, there's the REPL. Some interesting videos. We've got OCaml for Fun and Profit from 2023, go-to conference. What else we got? Oh, OCaml workshops, 21 keynote. Xavier Leroy. Yep, there's the OCaml workshops YouTube channel, so I'll include a direct link to that. And then we have a link to the Jane Street YouTube channel. They use OCaml quite a bit, so yeah, so there's a link to that. There is an exorcism learn OCaml track. I think you know I'm a big fan of this. Great way of it's a great way of sort of playing around with sort of classic algorithms that come up again and again. So you can go in and you'll see the usual, you know, hello world, difference of squares, nucleotide count, acronym, anagrams, binary tree search, pangrams, all that sort of thing. And if you've not seen these before, you sort of go in, it explains the concept to you and then sets you a programming task. Then there's learn X to Y, X in Y minutes. So it's great if you want a sort of quick overview of a language and you just want to get the, again, it's nice if you want to get the code aesthetics. And there's lots of code here you can sort of copy and paste and play around and also really useful further reading here, which you may find some of the links are the same as the one I've mentioned here. There, so it's a really great resource for that sort of stuff. And then this dodgy fella. So did I get around to... Yep. So I had a good run. Perl, R, Standard ML, OCaml, F#. So yeah, usual layout there. You probably see there's a create by Xavier Leroy, who was in here. There you go. So yeah. And yeah, usual stuff. So binding and scope stuff, functions and closures. You should be able to run all of these in the online REPL. Actually, these have all been ran and checked as of me putting this website together, although it's been around for quite a while now. Yeah, and so on all the way down. Do we have? Yeah, generally if it's here and I've got a link to it, I have actually managed to negotiate garbage collection and synchronization and concurrency okay. Generally with a lot of the languages, I don't know if anybody else finds this, to really properly evaluate a language to properly evaluate a language with the particular format I'm using here, I always talk about concurrency and various other things, and I always find that's the hardest thing for me with a language that I'm not familiar with, to get my head around how that's been implemented in the language, because there's lots of different ways of doing it potentially, you know, messaging and actors and all the other wonderful things you can do. So yeah, then a few instances the reason why there aren't links here is because I was getting to the point where I could do some of it, but it was falling apart when I got to the concurrency section, and sort of trying to just get my head around exactly what under the bonnet what was going on with memory management, which is always difficult to understand. And so, you know, that's a lot of the time here where the languages I'm not so familiar with, and also getting an angle. Like, I haven't done PHP yet because I just wanted to get an angle on it where maybe I was doing more of a scripting style PHP than one that's necessarily used for like rendering HTML. So I just wanted to work out the best approach to that, because I'm talking about fundamentals in this. And I think one of these I did start to do it. There is a link to it, and then yeah, I sort of fell over at the concurrency point, but then I did leave it there with just that section not filled in to do later. But I think once that happened once, I then going forward decided to just put everything on the back burner, get through a few more of these reasons and resources episodes, a little bit more work with online coding for certain languages, and then sort of revisit the stuff I'd skipped over. But the most important thing is that I did end up covering what was the original project here, which were these first 14 languages. And then I got a bit more confident and cocky and thought, oh yeah, I've had a really good run on these. And then I get up to Similar and it's like, And even though I know bits of small talk, yeah, I wasn't quite ready for revisiting that. So yeah, APL, special characters. You can see the ones I sort of skipped over here. Factor, although I did a video on it, there's some stuff I need to think through about, you know, memory management in stack-based programming languages and stuff like that. Then we get a good run. Gonna do pure script at some point. Idris, D, Nim, Zig. I think Nim and Zig should be fairly straightforward. And then C# was okay with Scala, yeah, that was what made me sort of fall over at the point I was doing that Learn to Code, Code to Learn series, where I was going through the 7 languages in 7 weeks. Scala finished me off a little bit just because of I think it was that one. It was one of them where I'd got so far and there were just so many different versions of code out there. Because of just the different version numbers, I'd sort of had to hold back a little bit. And then we get into this area where I'm completely unfamiliar. I've done a little bit of assembly language. And then this stuff again, another stack-based languages, Snowball 4, and good old BASIC, which I definitely want to revisit, see where it is now. So there we have it. Yep, like I said, if you want to just see what I've got up here around OCaml, then yes, there is an entry for that here. So thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I'll catch you in a future episode.